Welcome to K6 Wellness Revolution, where we believe health is worth fighting for. This podcast focuses on all things related to natural health, wellness, and vibrant living. We know your time is valuable, and I'm honored that you're spending some of it here. So get ready, because the Wellness Revolution starts right now. Welcome to the K6 Wellness Revolution podcast. I'm Sharon, traditional naturopath and family nurse practitioner at K6 Wellness Center in Dallas, Texas, where we blend trusted expertise, compassionate care, and a passion for helping you achieve optimal health, because wellness isn't just a goal, it's a revolution. So in 2024 and 2025, peptides like semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide, even some of these research-only ones like we see advertised AOD 9604 and 5-amino-1-MQ, they blew up so big. And if you read any kind of pop culture magazine, or if you're on the interwebs at all, you'll see that people are losing so much weight, 20 to 50 pounds without even trying. But you know, that doesn't come with no cost. So today we're going to discuss the whole wide world of weight loss peptides. And we're going to try to cut through some of the hype and just give everyone an honest look at the promises, the results, what risks are associated with some of the major players in the weight loss industry. And that can include the pharmaceutical, the ones that are FDA approved, as well as the ones that are still in research mode. They're still going through the clinical trials, so they're not really FDA approved yet. You can't go to the doctor and get a prescription for it. But just want to give this disclaimer, so please see neon flashing lights. This information is intended to help expand your knowledge base and help structure constructive decision-making and fruitful conversations with your healthcare providers. All caps here, people. Nothing in this podcast should be considered to be medical advice. It's pure entertainment. Wink, wink.
And we'll try to keep it entertaining.
Absolutely.
You hear people talking about peptides all the time, like they're magic potions or some secret biohacker cheat code. But every time someone says I'm on peptides, I don't know if they're talking about skincare, weight loss, or turning into the Hulk. But the simplest explanation for our listeners is that a peptide is just a tiny chain of amino acids, like a mini protein that acts as a signaling molecule to stimulate the body's natural processes and increase hormone production, like growth hormone. And then, think of proteins as long sentences made of amino acid words. So peptides are like short phrases, little snippets that still carry meaning. Because these little chains can act like signals in your body, they're basically tiny messengers that tell your cells what to do. And different peptides send different instructions, such as, grow more muscle, heal that tissue, regulate blood sugar, improve skin, turn down your appetite. So they're just basically little messages for your biology. But, Sharon, as you and I both know, all peptides are not all the same. There are hundreds of them. Some your body naturally makes, others scientists make in labs to copy or boost the ones you already have. Peptides are more like a whole category. So when people say, I'm taking peptides, you need specifics, because peptides covers everything from insulin to tanning peptides to anti-aging ones to weight loss hormones. We just have to figure out, hey, what message are you wanting to send your body? And today we're going to talk about the weight loss related messages.
Yes, because with the new year come new resolutions, and we all have a renewed sense of willpower and big dreams for the new year, right? And weight loss, I think probably like weight and money are the big New Year's resolutions, I think. If I were guessing, if I were a betting woman, that's what I would go for. But yeah, so today talking about peptides and how they affect weight loss, let's look first at GLP-1s. And this is going to involve semaglutide, tirzepatide, liraglutide, dulaglutide, exenatide, and lixisenatide, which I'm not that familiar with. So those are the generic names. And then, of course, we know them more by their market names, like Ozempic, which is for type 2 diabetes. And then there's Wegovy, which is the same drug, different company, but it has been approved for obesity. And then there's the oral form of the drug called Rybelsus, and it's for diabetes. So it's really interesting because they all go through this specific process for a specific problem, and they're getting FDA approval for, a singular thing. So while, you're not going to get, Ozempic isn't one form of a GLP-1 and Wegovy's another. It's the same drug. It's just the brand name. So it's kind of convoluted, and I think it can be very confusing for a lot of people. Just like tirzepatide is the generic name, but most people know it by Mounjaro, which is a diabetic drug, but Zepbound is the form of tirzepatide that gets used for obesity. And on it goes. I'm not going to go into all the names because it's really an exercise in vocabulary that I don't care to go down. But those are GLP-1s, right?
Right. And, I think it's important to start our conversation talking about semaglutide because it is the most popular one and it's used the most often, in my opinion, often used in the wrong way. It's the wrong tool for the wrong problem. But I think what we would love for our listeners is to just understand what each one of these peptides does so you can be educated in what you're choosing for your health. So semaglutide, it's a GLP-1 receptor agonist that selectively binds to and activates the GLP-1 receptor, which is physiological regulators of appetite and caloric intake, and they're actually present in several brain regions involved in appetite regulation. In animal studies, they demonstrate that semaglutide distributes to and activates neurons in brain regions that regulate food intake. This mechanism underlies its effects on weight management and metabolic control. For glycemic control and type 2 diabetes, semaglutide acts through GLP-1 receptor activation to enhance glucose-dependent insulin secretion and then reduce that glucagon secretion. So yes, semaglutide, it's become a heavyweight, no pun intended, in the weight loss world because it has impressive results in weight loss. In clinical trials, people using semaglutide lost an average of around 14 to 15% of their body weight, compared to only 2 to 3% with placebo. That's a pretty significant difference. But it's not without its risks. Every medication has side effects, and that's nothing new. But with semaglutide, people seem to experience the side effects more than, say, some other peptides we'll discuss. The most common adverse events are usually going to be gastrointestinal, like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. But, when you get rapid weight loss like you can get with semaglutide, that raises your risk of gallstones. You hear about people losing their gallbladder all the time after losing a bunch of weight really quickly. But, more severe side effects are rare, but, we've got to mention them is there's particular thyroid cancers, gastroparesis, rare, but it can happen. And the long-term outcomes, weight can come back. That's, I think, what you see the most. If you stop the medication, the weight's going to come back. So it's important to have a long-term management plan. Most people don't do that. Because yes, it's effective. Semaglutide can be very effective, but I'm personally not a fan of it because it's rapid weight loss. It's just too fast. And it creates this false impression of improved health simply because the scale is dropping. And without the real lifestyle changes, the weight usually returns and new health issues can show up. So while some also will tout that semaglutide, hey, it's going to work for inflammation or cardiovascular support or blood sugar control, there's other peptides with fewer dramatic side effects that can be just as effective. And I think we've got several to share today.
Yeah, absolutely. One is cagrilintide, and cagrilintide it's not at all, in the GLP-1 category, but its method of action is that it imitates or it mimics amylin. And amylin is a hormone that the body makes that helps to regulate your food intake and blood sugar. And it acts with insulin. And so how that plays out in the body when you take cagrilintide is a couple of things. Like it slows the rate at which food is going to leave the stomach. So you're not going to get that after meal glucose spike that you might otherwise. It's going to reduce inappropriate glucagon release after meals, especially for people who have type 2 diabetes. And so that's going to lower the amount of glucose that the liver puts out. But also, cagrilintide acts on an area of the brain that receives messages from hormones and nutrients, and it kind of helps indicate fullness so that you stop eating. That's known as satiety. So when the body feels satiated and you end up eating less because you're like, oh, I'm full, I'm going to stop now. This really helps to reduce food intake. So by addressing these signalers of hunger, satiety, and blood sugar regulation in the body, cagrilintide can be a great tool for improving metabolic health. And in fact, because it doesn't just make you feel like you're full, it can actually give a long-term appetite reduction. Because if you think about it, like if you get used to eating less, you typically can carry that forward. But also if you're eating less, you're probably, hopefully taking in fewer calories if you need to lose weight. But it also helps improve blood sugar balance because of that slow gastric emptying. So it's a nice long-term approach for obesity, and it does show better long-term retention of weight loss as opposed to GLP-1s. Now, as far as side effects go, it's kind of the same as GLP-1s. I mean, I think most drugs in general, it's going to be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, abdominal discomfort. But it's more likely to happen with cagrilintide if you increase the dose too fast, because dose matters with all of these drugs. There's a way to do it and there's a way you don't do it. And I think, to our listeners out there, you're going to hear us reiterate over and over again, this is why it's so important to work with somebody who knows what they're doing. If GI problems are problematic, then, your provider might want to discontinue the peptide or cagrilintide specifically, wait till everything calms down, and then start over, but at a lower dose. And that could be really helpful for the success long-term of using something like this. Now, there are some red flags, some side effects that people do need to be aware of, like severe pain or persistent vomiting, blood in your stool, dehydration. Those things are going to be a big problem, and you don't sit around and wait for it to pass. You need to let your provider know. Another one is that people take too big of a dose and they feel too full, and then they don't want to eat at all. That's not going to help your long-term goal whatsoever. And if it's a diabetic patient, you could actually cause hypoglycemia if they're on insulin or an insulin stimulating medication, and that could be life-threatening. So these are all things to be aware of and have a good conversation with your provider about. Now, long-term outcomes with cagrilintide are pretty significant, anywhere from 11% of body weight to more than 15%, but over a 68-week period. And that's kind of the longest we've really seen. But for people looking to lose at least 5% of their body weight, over 75% of the people did it just taking cagrilintide. And cagrilintide often gets paired up with GLP-1s. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, and so many of these, you'll see that people do stack and layer. And we'll mention some of those. I mean, you could really stack to ad nauseum. You don't want to do too many at once, but when you're looking at the different mechanisms of them, because there are several that have completely different approaches, and AOD 9604 is one of them, because that works through the hormonal signaling pathways that accelerate fat metabolism, especially in stubborn or diet-resistant areas. And it works by mimicking the natural fat-burning effects of human growth hormone. Specifically, it's its ability to trigger lipolysis, which is fat breakdown, and inhibit lipogenesis, which is fat formation. However, it does so without activating the pathways responsible for growth or insulin resistance, because not everyone needs that. And so it makes it a unique tool for targeted fat loss. AOD 964 does not act on the central nervous system, meaning there's not going to be any jitters, no blood pressure spikes, no cardiovascular strain. And, the average weight loss is typically going to begin to happen after 6 to 8 weeks in the research they've been doing. And it's got to be 6 to 8 weeks of consistent use. But here's a caveat. It's shown to be most effective when combined with diet and lifestyle. So it's helpful to just give you that extra boost. And so far, the side effects have been fairly minimal that they've reported. And that's just, injection site irritation or redness, headaches or fatigue, nausea. And that's usually when you're increasing the dose too fast. And once again, you're going to see that with many peptides. That's why we always recommend starting with the lowest dose first. But the long-term outcomes, it's just going to be enhanced fat metabolism, but it doesn't override those bad diet habits. Remember, it's paired best with a slight caloric deficit and consistent training. Another one that just goes from a different angle is the CJC 1295. And this one promotes visceral fat reduction by blocking lipoprotein lipase, an enzyme that stores fat, and enhancing triglyceride breakdown. That could be big for a lot of people. It can also improve sleep and recovery. And that's, going to be indirectly by aiding adherence to exercise and diet, but it can stimulate the pituitary to release more growth hormone. And that can support fat loss and improved body composition. Fat reduction plus muscle preservation, that's going to be a great weight loss strategy. And unlike synthetic growth hormone, which supplies growth hormone from an external source, CJC 1295 is going to stimulate your body's own production. So it's supporting a more natural and regulated increase. And by activating this pathway, the body increases growth hormone in its natural pulses, triggering a rise in liver-derived IGF-1. That's the powerhouse hormone behind stronger muscles, better fat metabolism, and enhanced cellular repair. And it also pairs well with other anti-inflammatory and immune modulating peptides such as BPC 157 and TB 500. However, it's most effective when combined with the growth hormone releasing peptide like ipamorelin, which activates the ghrelin receptor and boosts pituitary growth hormone release. On its own, CJC 1295 often produces more modest outcomes compared to the enhanced results that are seen when you stack the peptides. So there are not really any studies on CJC 1295 alone, since it's often stacked and paired. But the average weight loss is about 5 to 10 pounds over a 12 to 16 week time period when you're using it as a stacking mechanism. And studies do show, though, that this weight loss was primarily fat while preserving muscle. And some participants even gained 1 to 3 pounds of muscle. Who wouldn't like that? But, some common side effects, once again, mild injection site irritation, flushing, headaches, and some temporary water retention. That's just at the beginning as you're beginning the dosing. And rare side effects could be increased hunger or prolactin elevation. And that's where it's mitigated by ipamorelin stacking. And, there are some risks that you want to be aware of with this one. This is not going to be for anyone with a history of cancer because the growth hormone may promote growth of things that we don't want to grow. And, you've got to be careful with diabetes and really monitor blood sugar. We don't want to be disrupting the metabolic health in that regard. But you could also have pituitary issues. And the long-term data is limited, right? They're still studying and researching this one. So you just always want to consult your practitioner before trying really any of these. Because once again, the long-term outcomes, most the data is found from stacking. But there also aren't really any studies done beyond 3 to 6 months yet. I am sure there will be. So that's why this is still a research peptide. But if you consider body transformation, as long as diet and exercise are on point, it makes sense that weight loss and body composition will be maintained.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people do better when and it's called stacking or pairing, right? Where you're using multiple peptides at one time. And another one that is really good that we do see stacked, like you said, with CJC 1295 is ipamorelin. And this is a growth hormone releasing peptide. And what it does is it binds to your ghrelin receptors, okay, which is, when you hear us say receptors, I feel like sometimes we get lost in all of this language and lingo, but you have proteins or peptides, you have amino acids, and they're like a key, and a receptor is the keyhole for that one key. So a receptor is like a keyhole. The ghrelin receptor is what, again, ipamorelin addresses or fills. But ghrelin's your hunger hormone, okay? And it also plays a role with stimulating growth hormone release. And it does it without influencing cortisol production, prolactin, and other pituitary hormones. So it's really well tolerated for most people. It's also safer. Some people will use just human growth hormone injections, right, to get the results that they want. And it's, got a lot of attention. I always tease my clients. It's like, yes, 50 and 60-year-old men love human growth hormone injections. But when you introduce any exogenous hormones, your body is going to likely lower its own production of these hormones, and that could be problematic later on. So the nice thing about ipamorelin is that it works with your endocrine system, okay? And so these other hormone levels are going to remain unfazed and unchanged, and that's really nice. It is worth noting that ipamorelin, like a lot of other peptides, are banned in competitive sports. If you're a competitive athlete, you already know this. If you're thinking of becoming one due to the success of peptides, stop right there. It's not going to happen. So you'll get kicked out pretty quick. But ipamorelin by itself is not a weight loss peptide. It really comes down to what you're using it with. So most weight loss benefits really come through pairing it with other peptides like the CJC 1295 that Elena just spoke of. Ipamorelin is really nice too because it has fewer side effects than synthetic human growth hormone. It has a clean safety profile overall, and especially if you compare it with other growth hormone secretagogues. But the common side effects, which are mild and rare, thank goodness, include temporary headaches. You could have a little bit of water retention, bloating, a little bit of drowsiness, and of course, the redness, irritation at the injection site. And these are all common really during the first 2 weeks of use and should be temporary. If they're not temporary, it's probably not a good peptide for you to use. But long-term outcomes with ipamorelin, they're really big as far as building lean muscle, but it's a long-term outcome. You're not going to have this happen really in the first month. You have to do this for, at least 6 to 12 weeks. But ipamorelin, the outcomes are, yes, lean muscle mass, boosting fat loss, anti-aging, helps with injury recovery, and it can help improve sleep as well. But again, it's not going to be overnight. You may notice something in 2 to 4 weeks, but really, again, 6 to 12 weeks is going to be what you have to do to get any significant results. And I always say, well, it's easier. It says better muscle definition. Well, when you've melted fat, it's easier to see the muscles. It's kind of logical. It's also worth noting that ipamorelin does need to be cycled on and off. And this is where I'm just going to say, there's no magic formula necessarily. If you don't know what you're doing, you need to work with somebody knowledgeable. Don't guess, because you don't want to mess up your body. You don't want to create a problem just because you needed a little more definition. It's not worth it. You want to make sure that you've got a good provider helping you navigate the waters of peptides. Okay, so let's talk about another one, tesamorelin. So you've got ipamorelin and tesamorelin. And interestingly, this one, tesamorelin, was originally developed to treat lipodystrophy or abnormal fat distribution in HIV patients. And tesamorelin actually promotes the release of growth hormone. Therefore, it does help decrease your waist circumference, and also helps with decreasing overall visceral fat, or adipose tissue. And we always say visceral fat is heart attack fat. So, apple-shaped people where you carry all your fat in your torso, that's not healthy for your heart. So tesamorelin also improves muscle definition, which is really attractive for people looking to combat that middle age related change in your body that usually comes out to a thicker waistline. But it also is thought to offer some neurocognitive benefits like improved executive function, improved memory, better mental clarity. That's really awesome too. So, really, with is the weight loss associated with tesamorelin, it's just going to depend on what it's being paired with. There's not a lot of study centered on the number of pounds lost because this is really more about body composition. And as you know, if you've been in fitness or even athletics, the number of pounds lost really doesn't always pertain to inches or muscle definition or body comp. It can be very different for everybody. But tesamorelin did reduce visceral fat by up to like 18% over a 1-year period. And this was in HIV patients with a lipodystrophy. Now, some studies are centered on cognitive function improvement, cardiovascular health improvement. And so they're not really, they don't care how many pounds you lost. But you do have the same considerations here that you would have for ipamorelin. All right. These peptides are not like Lone Ranger peptides. You're going to use them in conjunction with something else, most likely. And as far as side effects, it's going to be very much the same as the tesamorelin. Tesamorelin as ipamorelin. I get all the morelins mixed up, but tesamorelin can increase your fasting glucose. So people who have diabetes or metabolic syndrome will need to monitor their blood sugar regularly. Maybe you even want to wear a continuous glucose monitor during this time. And your dosing is going to really, really matter here. And another notable side effect that we want to mention, it's not just tesamorelin, but there are a lot of other peptide therapies. They have a risk of this with long-term use. Your body can make neutralizing antibodies, and that can affect the efficacy of any peptide therapy. It will decrease the effectiveness. And it's not common, but it just makes it even more important that you have proper medical attention and supervision throughout your treatment with peptides. So somebody can be paying attention to your body's response to these peptides. The long-term outcomes with tesamorelin really depends on what you're going to pair it with. But most long-term studies, at least 1 year in duration, were really just done on HIV patients. And there aren't any studies that go beyond 2 years. And obviously, this is still a research peptide. But logically, let's think about this. If diet and exercise have been designed appropriate to a person's goals, then body composition achievements are going to be easier to maintain once you discontinue the use of a peptide. But like other peptides, if you don't have a good foundation to work from, your results are probably just going to be temporary, no matter what you're using. A really cool thing, an aside about tesamorelin, it's been shown to lower triglycerides and to increase HDL, which is your good cholesterol. And that helps reduce your cardiovascular risk factors. And because it reduces visceral fat, it has promising potential when it's used in metabolic syndrome, which is a whole, landscape of diagnoses, but a lot of it centers around obesity. On another note, so insulin growth factor 1, IGF-1, that elevation is a marker that we look at when we suspect cancer. And as you've heard us say, some of these growth hormone peptides can increase IGF-1. This needs, again, to be evaluated by a provider. If you have a history of cancer, this may not be the thing for you. Even though, trials haven't shown a definitive link between malignancy rates in peptides users versus the normal population, it still needs more study. And diabetics also just need to be really careful with tesamorelin because there's potential for retinopathy getting worse. So get professional supervision when you're using the peptides. Ipamorelin and tesamorelin. I get confused sometimes, but it is important to understand that tesamorelin is working. It's a growth hormone releasing hormone, whereas ipamorelin is mimicking ghrelin. Okay, and then you've got with ipamorelin, it's nice because you've got these short pulses that mimic like your natural nighttime growth hormone spikes. So it's more natural to what the body does as opposed to tesamorelin, which you're going to have more sustained levels of growth hormone and IGF-1. And then ipamorelin is really nice because it doesn't impact cortisol or prolactin, and it's really pretty clean in that regard, whereas tesamorelin is going to have a little impact on cortisol and prolactin and ACTH. So that's kind of a big deal. Now, tesamorelin is FDA approved, but only for HIV-associated lipodystrophy, okay, not as like a body enhancing or body composition treatment. And ipamorelin is not FDA approved for anything at this point. It's still considered a research chemical. So that's kind of the big differences. You are going to get similar results as far as reducing body fat. Tesamorelin is going to be more focused on the visceral fat, but they both work on visceral fat. So there you go. Then they're both considered kind of anti-aging. But
well,
yeah.
Speaking of anti-aging, I'm really intrigued by the research chemical peptide 5-amino-1-MQ because this one works by inhibiting the enzyme NNMT, which influences metabolism, cellular energy, fat storage, and aging processes. And by blocking NNMT, an enzyme that's often overactive in obesity and chronic illness, you get more NAD. And NAD is probably much more common of a buzzword than most of these other peptides we're talking about. Higher NAD improves cellular energy production and promotes greater fat burning, leading fat cells to store less and burn more. And since it raises NAD, that's the molecule essential for energy and DNA repair. It just makes the 5-amino-1-MQ really attractive to those aiming to enhance their cellular health and slow age-related decline, while also improving insulin sensitivity and reducing the fat cell size and promoting lipolysis and potentially even reducing inflammation. And a potential upside to this particular peptide is that it can be administered orally. And that's a nice option considering most of these peptides we're talking about are injectables. So, this oral one can be easily stacked with other therapies to enhance the weight loss. Plus, it doesn't affect your appetite because not everyone needs that. Some people do, some people don't. And, it's common for people to begin feeling an overall improvement with this one in energy in about 2 weeks. And the more energy often results in more activity. But it does take about 12 weeks of consistent use to begin to notice a change in weight with this one. And, studies have shown that it can reduce fat cell size by 30% and fat volume by 40%. And it can decrease cholesterol levels by 30%. That's really promising. So, 5-amino-1-MQ is typically well tolerated with only mild side effects reported so far. And that's, about the same ones with all these: mild nausea or stomach upset, headaches, fatigue, possible drowsiness or dizziness. And think about even an NADIV that's going to happen, or an injection. And you could have some changes in appetite and hydration. But as there is no formal clinical trial data yet, effects are considered uncertain. I still think they're promising, but we'll see. And the long-term outcome, this peptide is best when cycled on and off of, so the NAD can self-regulate. People often think more is better, but, with peptides, we always go with less is more first, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
And, it's important to note that 5-amino-1-MQ, it works best to enhance what you should already be doing: eating clean and exercising. This one will work with you, not just for you. It's also important, monitor your hormone levels as well. We got to make sure that we're not moving you one way or the other. We want to make sure there's balance with those hormone levels so it can work with your NAD and your cellular energy.
So this is the willpower peptide.
Yes.
Yes, very much. Okay, well, let's talk about MOTS-c. This is a teeny tiny little peptide. It's actually produced by mitochondria. And again, everybody knows what mitochondria are: the little power plants, battery packs, whatever you want to call them, inside your cells. The main job is just helping your cells adapt to energy, stress, and work more efficiently. And it acts also like an exercise mimetic. So it helps to regulate your metabolism. It improves your insulin sensitivity, and it promotes fat oxidation. So that's nice. Also increases your energy expenditure. So you're burning more calories. MOTS-c activates something called AMPK, which basically that's your body's metabolic master switch. And when AMPK's switched on, you're going to have a few really important things happen. Your cells are going to use glucose more effectively, and that's going to improve your insulin sensitivity. Your body's going to burn fat for energy more efficiently. Your mitochondria get a boost, making ATP and keeping your energy levels stable. And then your cells are going to become more resilient to stress, like oxidative stress from exercise or just aging, being alive. It's important to know how MOTS-c differs from other popular peptides like CJC 1295 or ipamorelin, because remember, those are boosting growth hormone. There are others that people have heard of: BPC 157, TB 500, and those are really more about healing tissues. MOTS-c works directly on the cell's energy machinery, or the mitochondria. So it's improving the metabolism and endurance without touching any of the hormones like growth hormone or testosterone. And, with weight loss associated with using MOTS-c, it's promising, but unproven as of yet. And that's, to me, it's part of why this is, it's got to be part of a plan, a more comprehensive plan. But, as of now, reports are that you could expect 10 to 15 pounds of weight loss over a 3-month period. Only though, if you combine it with diet and exercise or other peptides. It requires time, just like all the others. And you can expect, kind of the same side effect profile: mild fatigue, headache, dizziness, temporary nausea, and of course, the lovely injection site irritation. Glucose monitoring is important here as well. If you're pre-diabetic or you have diabetes, you do need to be monitoring that. And then the long-term outcomes with MOTS-c are kind of unknown as of yet. We don't really have enough data. There are some concerns about metabolic overstimulation. If you're constantly stimulating AMPK, well, your cell's natural energy signaling is going to be disrupted. And then also with changes in energy regulation, your hormone pathways could be impacted. And we just have to be careful with that and watch it. So MOTS-c is still considered a research compound, and we're kind of excited to watch the science develop with this one and continue to use it carefully, conservatively, as we do with all peptides,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. And, we've talked about the GLP-1s, the growth hormone peptides, the 5-amino-1-MQ and MOTS-c are more about the cellular energy. But sometimes weight issues aren't driven by metabolism at all. They can be driven by inflammation. When the body is inflamed, it holds on to fluid, disrupts hormone signaling, and it can make fat loss seem impossible. And that's where some of the inflammation focused peptides should have a mention here because they can be incredibly helpful. Peptides like BPC 157, TB 500, those support tissue repair, calm systemic inflammation, help the body recover from chronic stressors that can stall your progress. And when you target inflammation first, the metabolism often follows. Energy improves, cravings stabilize, and the body becomes more responsive to healthy diet and exercise. So in other words, reducing inflammation could be the key that finally unlocks weight loss. So I want to talk through a couple of these. KPV, that's primarily an anti-inflammatory and gut support peptide, not a weight loss agent. But think of it as a molecule that helps calm down irritation in the body rather than change appetite. It is going to help calm that irritation, support gut barrier function, and modulate the immune system. Any weight effects, of course, are going to be indirect, but better gut health, better, inflammation levels. And the side effects for this one are pretty mild. They just include maybe some digestive changes, headache, fatigue, or injection site reactions. Like we've said that for almost everyone. But
Yeah.
KPV is especially promising for the inflammation-driven weight issues. And it also bears mentioning it can help with mast cell activation and histamine overload, which can also have an impact on weight. And, just help the body regulate inflammation, you get improved overall health.
Yeah, and BPC 157, that's
Mhm.
another one. We've mentioned it a few times, and it's definitely not specific for weight loss, but man, this one is the Swiss Army knife, I feel like, of the
Absolutely.
peptide world. It helps with inflammation, and it does this by modulating inflammatory pathways, and it can help calm down localized inflammation. And that's more when it's injected. When you take it orally, it supports gut barrier integrity, and it can influence angiogenesis, or the formation of new blood vessels. And that can play a role in tissue recovery if you have better vascular activity. Now, there are no direct effects on metabolic fat burning with BPC 157, but people who take this do tend to feel less joint pain. Feel less joint pain, you're going to go for more walks or more runs, and then you're going to burn more calories. Many people also notice improvements in gut discomfort, and I've had people take this and after 2 weeks go, "Oh my gosh, my bloating is so much better." Or, if they're injecting it, they're just blown away by how much better, whatever they're taking it for feels.
Mhm.
And so that's really exciting. But for gut health, people find that they digest better, they're absorbing their nutrients better, and they feel more energized and nourished. And then, of course, I think when you feel better, you're going to sleep better, you train better.
Mhm.
Um, you're gonna have more positive lifestyle changes that impact your weight. So that's really a cool thing. And BPC 157 is another one. It's just mild with regard to side effects. And it's just a great line of defense for gut health and inflammation, and one that we definitely will start people with if they're interested in
Mhm.
peptides. So there's that. Now, TB 500, this is a synthetic peptide that is designed to mimic part of thymosin beta 4, which is a naturally occurring protein that you find in just about every human cell. And it's involved in cell migration, tissue repair, and inflammatory modulation. So this is really used with muscle, tendon, ligament injuries. And a lot of times you'll see it paired with BPC 157 to improve recovery times. So it also, the end result with this is going to be reduced inflammation. And that's, a really important for people who are active or trying to maintain an active lifestyle, it's going to be very important because you are going to get hurt
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah. And, we've talked about these anti-inflammatory peptides. There's one more, at least, that I want to mention, and that's LL37. Because what if your weight struggles are due to gut bacteria imbalances? And this is where LL37 just shines because it supports gut health by regulating inflammation, tissue repair, and immune response because it acts as a broad spectrum antimicrobial against bacteria, including gram-negative bacteria, which can be antibiotic resistant, but it also helps fight viruses and funguses. And, it helps issues like leaky gut, irritable bowel disorder, and bloating. So while it's not a weight loss peptide, it can reduce gut-driven inflammation that contributes to weight gain and is often stacked with BPC 157 for GI repair. And, we always start with low dosing on this one as well, but I really love LL37.
Yeah, that it is a really interesting one. I think with all of these though, there is that dark side.
Mm-hmm.
There are risks that people don't want to acknowledge. I think there's things that people who use it or people who watch their friends use it notice, like Ozempic face, which is,
Mm-hmm.
those of you who haven't seen it, you could Google it. But it's a sunken, sallow face. And, it's not unique to Ozempic. And I'm not picking on Ozempic because really anyone of a certain age, if you lose weight too fast, you're going to lose some muscle mass. And that's not healthy, especially for women, because if you want to protect your bones, strong muscles make strong bones. And if you're burning up your muscle, because you're crash dieting in essence, then you're not helping your long term situation at all. Um, and then there's the gastroparesis, the bowel obstruction. I think there's even lawsuits with this now. And GLP-1s do get called out more, but I think they're more present in the market. But, you got to consider like 10 to 30% of GLP-1 users experience diarrhea or constipation,
Mm-hmm.
and 20 to 44% experience nausea and vomiting. So that's a pretty significant amount of people feeling some sort of GI side effect. And those are the milder ones. Fortunately, only like 1 to 5% experience the more severe GI issues like gastroparesis, reflux issues, gallbladder things like a gallbladder and biliary, like cholestasis and so gallstones. But that again, is it from the peptide or is it from the fast weight loss?
Mm-hmm.
That's what people, aren't always looking at. And then there's, things like pancreatitis, which is awful. And if you don't catch it, I mean, pancreatitis can be life threatening if it's not treated right. Thyroid cancer, medullary thyroid cancer, actually. There's a black box warning on GLP-1s for this. And even though it's rare, there is the concern about general cancer promotion. And then even depression and suicidal ideation is a concern. And then for diabetics especially, are we making retinopathy worse? Are we causing vision loss? I've been reading some articles about noted vision changes in users of GLP-1 agonists drugs. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
something to pay attention to. So these are problems. Even growth hormone peptides can present. If any peptide that is allowing you to lose weight in an unsafe or a very accelerated
Mm-hmm.
fashion is going to carry some of these, some significant risks. And it's just like if you got dumped out in the desert and with no food and very little water, you'll look like it for a long time. And when I start reading about stuff like this, I think of Matthew McConaughey on Dallas Buyers Club and
Yes.
how he went through like a
Mm-hmm.
huge weight loss to play that role, and he did such a good job. But I always thought he was so good looking and so handsome, and he carried around that sallow look for years. afterwards. And some people say he never got it back. But you lose muscle, you lose enough muscle, you lose enough fat tissue. And if your body has if your skin integrity is not that great, or maybe you have a little bit of saggy skin, it's gonna show for a while, unfortunately. But then, when you lose muscle loss, or you're just not eating, if your appetite centers have been turned off, you're not improving your metabolism. You're hurting your metabolism. So your body's ability to burn calories is not going up. It's going down. And that's what I think people don't understand, is what are the long-term implications? Am I helping my metabolism by maybe cutting out, 500 calories a day, but now I have the energy to go exercise, and now I'm not so hungry that I make bad food decisions. I'm able to think through my dietary choices. That's not what's really happening with a lot of these peptides.
Right.
Yeah, they say 20 to 40% of GLP-1 users experience lean muscle loss. That's not good.
No.
Then you see these compounding pharmacy horror stories, which I love compounding pharmacies, but
I know this didn't make them look good.
there's just things that happen. And then you have all of these black market peptide sellers, right? You've got they call it the Chinese raw powder roulette. So where is the stuff coming from? Do you really know that you're getting what you paid for? It's hard. It's hard to know. It's very convoluted. I do wonder if we'll start seeing a few more, maybe a little pickup in the rate of FDA approval, just so the FDA can get a better handle or control
quality
over some of these
control.
peptides. Yeah, we'll see. Who knows, right?
Mhm.
I have my issues with the FDA, but
Right. I know.
we'll see. um, but you got to remember too, when you're looking at peptides, who are these drugs actually for? Like if you're looking at GLP-1s or any weight loss peptide, if you're obese, and obese is defined as a body mass index of more than 30, which I take issue with some of that, because I feel like our BMI scale is just so stupid. But
Mhm.
if you're too fluffy, right? Let's just say if you're too fluffy, or you're overweight, you have some comorbidities. Maybe you have high blood pressure, or high triglycerides, high inflammatory markers in your blood work. Okay, using a weight loss peptide could be a clear win for you. But if you're
Mhm.
mildly overweight, right? Maybe you get a little hangover, a little muffin top, or maybe your underwear don't fit the way they used to. Maybe it's more of a vanity thing. You don't want to get into the stress in 3 months or whatever. You've got to really be careful when you go into any peptide program, and underlying any of this, whether it's obese, overweight, vanity, whatever, is the lifestyle being addressed? Because if it's not, you are not helping yourself, and you could create more problems than you realize by doing it wrong.
Right. You've got to address the lifestyle. But then you also want to make sure that you're choosing the right peptide if you want to explore that for your health. And the very first step is blood work and genetic screening if you can. Because before you touch any peptide therapy, it's important to understand your metabolic profile, your hormone levels, your kidney and liver function, your inflammation markers, and when possible, your genetic predispositions, to understand what are your weaknesses. Is it inflammation or hormone balancing? What is it? Because peptides can affect multiple systems, so we need a good baseline. And the mistake many people make is they just jump in because they're desperate for a change in their weight or their health, and they heard about this one particular peptide from a TikToker, and they want to try it, so they just get some random, who knows what kind of quality peptide, and they haven't considered which one is truly going to be the best match for their current state of health. And I mean, really, those unregulated sources are scary. You don't know what the purity is. You don't know, is it the correct molecule? How about the sterility or concentration? People often think they're saving money by getting these things they can find online, but you're gambling with contamination and mislabeling. So yes, I don't always love everything the FDA does, but there's there needs to be some kind of oversight and some quality control. And I love that all the ones that we use always have third-party purity testing. That's so important. But in addition to those things, once again, I'm just going to say, you've got to have that strong foundation. You have to have the healthy lifestyle. Healthy lifestyle and diet are key to success for any weight loss plan, peptides included. You always want to include some resistance training and adequate protein intake, because without those two things, peptides may help with appetite or energy balance, but you risk losing the lean mass. And losing muscle makes weight regain even easier later on.
And then there's the balance of cycling a peptide versus continuous long-term use.
Mm-hmm.
And because some peptides do require cycling, and very short cycles, in fact, because your body will build tolerance to some of these things. And there are other peptides that can be used ongoing, but still need a little monitoring. And sometimes we cycle just for psychological reasons to prevent dependency, or especially like where appetite suppression comes in. You need to cycle it and then get off and make sure you can maintain before you go back and maybe pursue more weight loss. But there's no one size fits all. This is where supervision really, really matters. And the real work happens with peptides when you're getting off of them, right? Because now we're going from pharmacological assisted appetite control or, metabolic modification to now it's got to be behavioral and nutritional strategies. And this is why I think at least 70% of people who do the pharmacological GLP-1s regain the weight when they quit using the drug. And I had it out with a drug rep one day over this. They don't want you to lose eligibility for the drug. So where then is the motivation to provide the nutritional and lifestyle advice to help you sustain your results? There's a real conflict of interest there. It's a problem. So you've got to be looking out for yourself. This is a lot of what we do. We help people. The nutrition, the lifestyle, that's our jam. We want you to eat the right things and do the right things. So yeah, the goal isn't just to lose weight, but it's to help you maintain it safely. And peptides, like diets, like workout programs, they're tools. They're not magic all by themselves. But, peptides, when you use it responsibly, with proper testing and guidance and lifestyle support, this can be a great sustainable strategy to improve your health and slow down the aging clock.
Yeah. I mean, you got to remember that there are no miracle drugs. If you put trash in, you will only get trash out. That being said, peptides can be a really useful tool to help retrain the body, to have better eating habits, physical conditioning and recovery, and addressing inflammation. But you still have to do the right things that will help you build health. And as you've listened today, I hope that maybe one or several of these peptides resonated with you and you're thinking, maybe I'd like to try this approach for my health. Don't hesitate. Please reach out to us and schedule an appointment so we can discuss what the best option is going to be for you to have optimal weight, optimal energy, and just optimal health.
Yeah. And thanks to our listening audience today, or watching if you're one of those psychopaths who watches this on video. I always think I look crazy, but we hope this episode resonates with you, however you received it, and that you can use this information to make better decisions toward your health and wellness. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Follow us on Rumble, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram for more wellness content. And if you'd like to book a consult with one of our practitioners, visit k6wellness.com to learn more or schedule a free discovery call. We are located in Dallas, Texas, but we do work with people all over the world. So until next time, take care, be well, and as always, your health is worth fighting for.